Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy. Welcome to a new video. Today I wanted to talk to you about the Torso T-1. It's quite a special sequencer, a bit unusual than your classic step sequencer. And you can see you can quickly create something and play around. And what I love about this machine first is the 16-track step sequencer. So you have your 16 track here and you have CV output. So for example, here I'm controlling my modular with the gate and CV. You have a clock out, which is synchronizing the GFAM. And I have the MIDI, which was sequencing the TR6S, and finally I have as well a synth by Ableton link, which was controlling the stab that you could hear. So that's really great because I like to work with all inside Ableton with hardware, CV, MIDI. So that was kind of a cool thing for me. And the second cool thing as well, obviously, it's like a different way of sequencing. It's a Euclidean sequencer, so which means that you select a number of steps that you want. So here 16, and then you can add event. So for example, here it's gonna hit 5 times. But then the Euclidean sequencer is gonna distribute evenly each event. So you can see here there is 3 steps separating, but all of the other are 2, 2, 2, and you always try to distribute it as evenly as possible. And the great thing about that is like maybe it's gonna create pattern that you haven't think about it. You can obviously using as a classic step sequencer if you want so, but I will recommend to maybe go a bit more like something crazy. And the cool thing about is you can start with something pretty simple, and then you have a lot of parameter and function that you can add to this simple pattern, which can make it a little bit more interesting. And the first one being, for example, the repeat, which is gonna add this kind of rattle, retrig effect, call it how you want, ratchet, and you can select the length of the repeat. So, but you can select the time. Something more like this, but you can control the velocity offset, which means that you basically repeat the velocity can be crescendo or can be decreasing. So here it's decreasing, and I like this. You can control as well the pace between each repeat. You can add a bit of nice groove. And then on top of that, you can as well play with the velocity. So you can control the velocity. Obviously, you have as well probability, which will determine how often you note will play. And you have as well this groove and accent. And this is pretty nice because basically groove give you a different type of groove. The first one are kind of step sequencing groove, and the 4 other one on the bottom are kind of LFO, and they are basically like variation that's gonna be applied to your pattern, and you control the amount of this variation with the accent button. So you can hear like already my pattern has changed. You can control the sustain, and you can as well adjust the timing. So like if you want to do like some swing or shift a little, that can be nice. For that I would probably need to have a kick drum going. And let me actually bring back the bass, which was so yeah. So the cool thing as well is you can add a variation of a pattern. So for example, here I have my closer hat pattern, but you have as well cycle, and it's allowed you to create variation of this pattern. So for example, I'm gonna select the second one, and I'm gonna change the pulses because it's the easiest one to understand. And let me actually reduce. So it's playing once, it's playing this one with a lot, way much more step, and the other one, which is just has 3 steps. And you can have like up to 16 variation of the same pattern. So that's pretty good. So that was mainly for the drum. Now you can create nice and interesting evolving melodies as well. So obviously all what I've applied and told you about with this cloud hat can be applied with a melodic element. So here I had this track, which is sequencing the modular. So if I start to create event, and you can change the pitch here. So you can either select just one note, or you can select like a combination of notes. You can choose the scale here. I'm gonna stay in chromatic. You can choose the root obviously you want, and then you have the first parameter, which is voicing, which is gonna tell you how you want your chord that you just select with the pitch to play. So you control this with the voicing style, and the first row it's basically playing as a chord, and the second row down is like playing as an arpeggiator. So here I'm more interested in the arpeggiator way, so I'm gonna select this one and I'm gonna unmute, and obviously the depth of this modification is controlled with like this, and this will play as well, you're not an octave upper. Now you can add some extra phrase and melody variation with this range and phrase button. So basically it lets you choose between 8 different phrases. The first one are kind of melodic step sequencing, rather than the 4 bottom are like LFO style. So let's select, for example, this one, and again I'm gonna just unmute, apply how much I want, and you can see that now the melody starts to change. One thing I've done as well for this pattern is reduce the sustain, as is with CV. I just need a very short trigger, so that's why I reduce the sustain. Maybe. And one thing, once you decide to have a pattern that you like, there is one thing I haven't talked yet, which I love about this, is the random feature. Basically, with that you can randomize any parameter that is written in white. So you can press random and select the amount of the modulation you want from the random. But each parameter have its own random sequence, basically. And the second interesting thing with the random, if you double click on it, here when it's all in red, basically your random sequence is kind of a 16-step random sequence. So it's like random step, but they kind of loop after 16 steps. But you can also, if you want something like more like the classic sample and hold, for example, random LFO or sequence, you can just select, if you have all of your pads in blue, it will basically be a continuous and endless randomization, rather than here it's more controlled randomization. It's the same randomization repeating over and over, which is nice because it adds variation, but it's not just like a chaos of just random thing happening. So we're gonna apply that to our voicing and range. So now it's the same pattern playing, but you will have some variation. Maybe we can. Maybe add some repeat, and then you can create a nice melodic element that is always changing. Other thing I haven't talked about, but I haven't used it much, is the division. It's basically the note value for each step. So again, you have your 8, 16, etc. Other thing I haven't talked is the harmony, which lets you switch basically the note, but it's just switching one note at a time. So it can be great to kind of trying to find a different value, but yeah, I'm gonna go back with this one. So then you have a few performance oriented function. Well, you see me using mute, but you have as well this temporary function, which basically means that when your pattern is running, you can hold temp and modify any pattern, and it will modify your original pattern until you hold temp button, but then once you have temp release it, it will remove all of the variation you've made. I've done it in the demo with the length, and you can do that to the whole pattern, so that's what I'm gonna do. Again, I'm gonna mute everything. And you can press temp pattern, and then it go back to normal. You can do the same with, for example, the number of pulse. To be fair, I haven't really get too much into the performance side of the machine. I'm like more still trying to learn how to use the algorithm and the Euclidean sequencing and how I can use its function and implement and create new things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Really love this interesting way to creating things in a different way. It's a different approach to sequencing. So for example, it's different than the classic step sequencing from the Roland 6S or from my beat step. And it's allowed me to kind of refreshing a little bit everything, and that's exactly what I wanted. It's gonna be really great for me to, for example, create interesting hats pattern and percussion pattern, creating this kind of as well kind of melody that are always changing, a bit random, like not your main melody, even though I think you can probably, but more like this a bit of random melody here and there, which will add variation and break the monotony to your track. Second reason I like to use it, sometimes I like to create track and just using kind of hardware, or at least like I want to jam and I just want to use pieces of hardware. This is kind of the perfect things because it has CV input, media output. I can, if I want to use something in Ableton, I can use it, and I can just like put it in the center like I've done here and like kind of sequence everything, and I have everything there because you have 16 tracks, so you will kind of never run out. And yeah, I think it's good complementary sequencer from, if you have already, for example, the push to, which are more classic, or the beat step or the beat step pro, that can be a good complementary sequencer, like especially if you are thinking like you're always doing the same drum pattern or the same sequencing the same way. That can be a new fresh approach to sequencing and kind of generate new idea or pattern that you haven't think about it in the first place. Now, if you think I wish we could do that, we still cannot, but maybe it's possible with a firmware update, is for example the number of phrases. Maybe if we could import our own or create our own like phrases, same with the groove, and then import them, and this way instead of just having like 8 we could have like some extra. That could be great, for example. Alright, I think that's pretty much it, everything I wanted to show you. Well, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what it can do. Hopefully I could show you how it's fun to play and how it's easy to sequence things and create something original, and like starting from something simple and adding different function to create something original. Hope you like the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe as usual, and see you soon guys. Bye bye.